music theory. I love what I've been taught. I love music theory. I love it quite a lot. I love to think that there's some kind of order in this land, that things happen for a reason we understand. But one day I was sitting in my music theory class. We were learning to omit the fifth when another student asked, "Why?" There was an answer to her question. An answer that made sense. Because these rules exist for reasons. So there's no need for pretense. But her question sparked a question that's been circling my mind. If I know these rules so well, then why have I never asked why? Why didn't I ask why? Am I colonizing myself? Or am I complicit while it's done to me by someone else? These rules have been my anchor, my rock, my halt. But we don't live in a vacuum. This is not just art. Melissa Dunphy says composition is a calling to bring voices to the forefront that haven't had a voice before. But the language that I have to give these voices is the language of destruction, hate, and war. I don't know how to feel about this. I've been wondering all night. I love music theory, but I don't know what is right. I guess I'll learn to harmonize inside myself, and so I'll bring voices to my people in the only language I know. Hello, and thank you for being here. Welcome to my senior recital. The piece you just heard is called Music Theory and Me, A Complicated Relationship, subtitled Am I Colonizing Myself? I wrote this song in my sophomore year at Hollins. We learned a new rule in my music theory class, and one of my classmates asked why that rule was the standard. This made me realize that even though I knew to question everything in history or humanities classes, I hadn't thought to use that same critical thinking when it came to music. The aha moment in this song is what started me down the path that eventually became this recital. There will be a few more pieces that I composed over the past 3 years, and then I will talk about some of the things that I figured out after I started asking why. There is a link to the program in the description below the video, where you can see who the performers are, program notes that can tell you a little bit about each piece, and lyrics for all the pieces that have words. So on that note, up next is my setting of This Land Is Your Land, performed by Hollins University's Talmadge Singers.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. grassy hill, a peaceful stream. But once my boy was born to dreams. He tried to spice things up and screamed, the wolves are coming home. The villagers had quite a fright. They told him lies were not alright. No one believed that fateful night the wolves were coming home. The wolves were coming, the wolves were coming, the wolves were coming home. No one believed that fateful night the wolves were coming home. Red Riding Hood's grandmother lay asleep in bed, ran on her way. But little Red, she could not say the wolves were coming home. He lured her in with crooked charm, a gentle brush, a paw, an arm. Before she saw he wished her harm, the wolves were coming home. The wolves are coming, the wolves are coming, the wolves are coming home. Before she saw he wished her harm, the wolves were coming home. 3 little pigs were very strong. They built their homes while singing songs, but they knew that before too long the wolves were coming home. They lifted hay and stacked their sticks and built their fears into the mix, but as they laid their final bricks, the wolves were coming home. The wolves were coming, the wolves were coming, the wolves were coming home. As they laid their final brick, the wolves were coming home. A wolf had eaten Peter's friends. He jumped the fence to get revenge. The woods were not too far ahead. The wolves would not come home. He hunted deep into the trees and hung the wolf up by his knees. His friends at last were whole and free. The wolves would not come home. The wolves were coming, the wolves were coming, the wolves were coming home. His friends at last were whole and free. The wolves would not come home. We go about our daily lives. We read the news and feign surprise. But right before our very eyes, the wolves are coming home. Fearful hatred grew and spread like wildfire, and our country bled across the map in hatred red. The wolves are coming home. In cages left in icy care, the children sing a desperate prayer. You and I, we must prepare. The wolves are coming home. The wolves are coming, the wolves are coming, the wolves are coming home. You and I, we must prepare. The wolves are coming home.
of music theory. It makes sense in my mind when I'm stressed and strained and tired. It is a blanket warm and kind. But the blanket falls across my eyes, and so I cannot see the world outside this box. It is right there waiting for me. How to decolonize myself when it's all I've ever known. I long to think so differently from how I've yet been shown. I lift my chin up, shoulders back, and say the time is now to unlearn these antiquated rules, but I just don't know how. I can try to unhear these rules, to just choose some notes and play, but in the end I know I'd never stray too far away. To play music so free, by rules unbound, is to write without language, just meaningless sound. But I have no other musical language to write. If I want to say something, I have to hold tight to these rules. This system is all that I know. I would leave it behind, but then where would I go? I'm aimless. To become so much more, to grow beyond this metaphor. I can take a sharp stone and carve down to my bones, but I can't rewrite my heart and veins alone. I want to become so much more, to grow beyond this metaphor, to share this epiphany and let it ring, but I burn my tongue on the words I sing. I hear music sung by angels above, and I hate my heart for what it loves. I want to become so much more, to grow beyond this metaphor. But until I find out where I want to go, I'll stay here in the only language I know. When I first started my Music Theory and Me songs, the plan was to make it a trilogy. There would be Music Theory and Me, A Complicated Relationship, subtitled Am I Colonizing Myself? Music Theory and Me, the sequel, and Music Theory and Me, the finale. The first song, which was actually originally on ukulele, was just an introduction into thinking about these topics for the first time, realizing I hadn't been thinking critically about music theory, and asking the question, am I colonizing myself? The sequel answers that question, saying, well, it's a bit more complicated than that. I didn't fully understand the word colonizing when I wrote the song, but yes, I kind of am. And that song asks, what do I do about it? Writing the sequel took me a long time, over a year, because I was trying to come up with different ideas to decolonize myself, to break free of the musical system that I felt trapped in. And I was trying to figure out how to communicate that through song. But I just went in circles for a long time because I didn't know what I was trying to say. So the final version of the song ended up having a few different basic themes, I think. One is that I don't quite know what I'm saying. I know I'm on the brink of understanding something big, and I know it's a metaphor for more than just music theory, but I can't articulate what it is. Another theme is that I can't figure it out alone. I spent most of my time trying to write this song only through my own self-reflection, and at some point I realized I was doing that, and I started to reach out more and ask around. I had some great conversations with friends in other departments about overlapping themes, and even after just a few Google searches, I found a lot of people who were in music and music theory who were talking about racism within the field. Another theme in the song was the concept of music as a language. People like to say that music is a universal language, and that's a lovely sentiment, and it is true that music can bring people together across cultural and language divides, but music is not a universal language. There are many different traditions of music, and each one is its own language. In the US, which is all I can really speak for, we primarily learn Western tonal music. It's a beautiful musical language, but it's not universal. So when I was writing Music Theory and Me the sequel, and I tried to throw away the rules of music theory to decolonize myself and break free, I was stuck. I could write music outside of the Western tonal system, technically, but I was basically just playing random notes. One draft of the song actually had a section where I just played random notes on the piano to throw away the music theory rules. And it could sound cool, but I wasn't saying anything. And I realized that I was trying to leave behind the language of Western tonal music, but I didn't know any other musical language. I couldn't communicate without a language, but I was trying to write a song about the fact that I only knew this one musical language. And that made it hard to write the finale that I had originally planned. Music Theory and Me the sequel was originally meant to be a midpoint, a kind of emotional transition piece in the recital. And the finale was going to be a third song that would wrap up all the loose ends from the first two songs. But there were two problems. One was the catch-22 that I was stuck in. I was trying to write a song about feeling stuck in the language of Western tonal music, but that was the only musical language I had to write the song. And the second problem was, the first song asked, am I colonizing myself? And the sequel answered, yes, and asked, what do I do about it? And the finale was supposed to answer that question, but I don't have any answers. So I decided to revamp the finale song into this, just talking a bit about my thought process while writing these songs. So after 3 years of thinking about why music theory made me feel trapped and uncomfortable and betrayed, I figured out that my problem with music theory mostly isn't with the content itself, but with the place it holds within the academic classical music sphere. And honestly, a lot of that comes down to language, even just calling it music theory. Because if we break down what music theory should mean, by definition, in academics, theory means methods of analyzing and understanding abstract concepts. So music theory should mean methods of analyzing and understanding music. But for one thing, each musical practice has its own theory, so there isn't one method you could use to analyze and understand all music. What we call music theory is only part of one particular musical tradition. Most of it only helps us analyze and understand music from Europe a few centuries ago. In our school, our last semester of theory is dedicated to post-tonal music. So to be fair, we're not just learning the theory of Western tonal music, we're also learning the theory of Western atonal music. But it's still descended from the same system. It's done by the same people. And I think it's interesting that none of our music theory classes focus on jazz, which also has roots in Western tonal music. Another problem with the term music theory is that a lot of the music theory curriculum, at least in the US, is taught more as a set of rules or guidelines. I'm especially thinking of voice leading, which is part of our music theory class that is a set of rules that teaches us how to write music for multiple voices so that they blend together well and move smoothly. And it's really helpful and good to know when you're writing music in the Western classical tradition, like I do. But it isn't really a method of analyzing and understanding music. An analogy I like is, imagine you take a linguistics class, which, from my understanding, linguistics can sort of be called languages theory for now. It sounds like it should teach methods of analyzing and understanding how languages work. But instead, you learn how to read and write in English. There's nothing wrong with reading and writing in English, but linguistics would be a bad title for that class. And my using English in that analogy isn't a coincidence. The enforcement of English has been used as a colonizing force, a white supremacist weapon, diminishing and sometimes eradicating other languages and reframing everything in English terms, in white terms. English isn't the only language that's been used like this, but it's the one that I see most living in the US. And Western tonality is the musical language equivalent. It's been kind of hard for me to talk to people about music theory like this, because I think a lot of the music theory world, the classical music field, doesn't want to talk about anything, especially race and racism. For example, one class I was in a few semesters ago covered some of the history of musical theater, and one day in class we were talking about blackface minstrelsy. This is a quote from the textbook we read that day. In any discussion of blackface, a sense of historical perspective is essential. Although it is offensive in our time, blackface was a widely accepted convention for more than a century. Most performers who used it were just trying to put on a good show, not make a racist comment. Suggesting that all performers in blackface were automatically racist is comparable to saying that anyone performing in drag must be a transsexual. I have a lot of problems with this passage. For one, implying that just because blackface was widely accepted in the past meant it wasn't offensive then. But I'm just going to focus on the way this passage goes out of its way to avoid saying that blackface minstrelsy is racist. Comparing being a racist to being a transsexual implies that being a racist is part of your internal identity, as if it's something you are, instead of something that you do, and can learn to stop doing. And it also just misses the point. It redirected the focus of the chapter to figuring out if the performers were racist or not racist, which doesn't really matter. It cut off any discussion the book might have had about the practice itself. Blackface minstrelsy taught white audiences that black people weren't intelligent enough to be unhappy with being enslaved or working in unlivable conditions, which told those white audiences that it was okay for them to be complacent because there wasn't anything to worry about. This is true whether or not the individual performers were internally morally racist, but that's still what the textbook was talking about. I and some of the other students in the class brought up counterpoints, and the professor said they agreed that it was really important to have these conversations, but we never ended up having any conversations. I have a lot of experience with race and racism not being discussed in music. And some of that is because of this idea we have that the arts are somehow pure, that they can't be racist because it's just creative expression, as if the arts exist in a vacuum and aren't affected by the world around them. But it definitely isn't just music theory that has these problems. Music theory is just one part of the whole, one manifestation of the same system. For example, my friends showed me some poetry written in English about the conflict of writing in English. Bilingual Blues by Gustavo Pérez Fermat was one I especially connected with because it's about similar concepts to what I was trying to get at in my music theory in these songs. The fact that I am writing to you in English already falsifies what I wanted to tell you. My subject, how to explain to you that I don't belong to English, though I belong nowhere else. The books How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi and White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo both have sections that explain exactly how my musical theater textbook derailed the focus in a chapter about blackface minstrelsy away from its being racist, and how the professor avoided engaging in any conversation about it. And those books weren't written about the music field. And there is a fantastic paper by music theory professor Philip Ewell called Music Theory and the White Racial Frame that takes the larger sociological concept of the white racial frame and explains how that concept shows up in the field of music theory. So in conclusion, I was going to have a nice conclusion here, but I don't really have a point to re-emphasize. In music and anywhere else, anti-racism and decolonization aren't an answer the question thing, they're an ongoing process. So engage with it. Try to see the big picture. Question everything. This concludes my senior recital. Before I go, I have a lot of people I need to thank. Thank you to my family, my friends at Hollins and beyond, my professors and my non-professor mentor figures, everyone who performed in this recital, or who helped me learn how to use the technology to put this video together, or who helped me design and print and distribute flyers. I could not have done this without you, and I am so thankful. As a symbol of my gratitude, here is a picture of my dog. I would also like to give a more detailed thank you to the music department. My theory classes with Professor Reddle taught me the rules and conventions of Western tonal music. I write music in this tradition, and I wouldn't be able to without a solid understanding of the concepts I learned in these classes. My history of Western music classes with Dr. Krauss gave me historical and sociological context for the music I was studying. I learned to write for treble voices by studying the music I performed with the Hollins choirs. And this semester, I was able to take a new course with Dr. Walfouts on racial and cultural bias in music, which gave me a chance to actually learn about what I talked about in this recital. I wouldn't have been able to do this project without the skills I learned from the whole department, so truly, thank you. And you can read the full thank you in the program, linked in the video description. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for being here, and I will leave you with this.